Today we are talking about Jesus' unique miracle of healing the deaf and the mute. And that story is found in the Gospel of Mark chapter 7 verses 31 to 37. And Mark, among the four Gospel writers, is the only Gospel writer who talks about this story. Now, without the Gospel of Mark, we would not have come to know about this special encounter that Jesus has with this man who was deaf and mute. And Mark has a special reason to record this story. Before we go into the details, let's talk about this story. Now, Jesus is returning to Decapolis, a Gentile territory. And people there bring to Jesus a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment. And they request Jesus to lay his hands. And Jesus does some weird action. Takes this man away from the crowd. Then he puts his finger in the man's ears. And he touches his tongue with the spit. And then Jesus looks up to heaven and says, Ephphatha. And then it's done. The miracle happens. And people are looking at Jesus with admiration. Imagine the world of the deaf man. No sound. He could not hear the sound of the breeze. He could not hear music. He could not hear what others were talking about. It was a silent world. And not only that he was deaf, he also had a speech impediment. He could not communicate properly with others. Jesus performs this miracle among the Gentiles. And why is that important? Because Mark is depicting Jesus as having hostile opposition from the Pharisees and from Herod Antipas. This is one reason that Jesus moves away from the Jewish territory to a Gentile territory. Now there is another reason why Jesus is performing this miracle among the Gentiles. We see Jesus very intentionally including the non-Jewish world into his ministry. Jesus in Decapolis. And why pay attention to the name of this place? Jesus had earlier been in Decapolis in Mark chapter 5, wherein he heals a man possessed with demons and allows the demon to go into the herd of pigs. And people had a very surprising reaction. They requested Jesus to leave their land. It appears that the people paid more attention and cared more for the pigs than the man who was healed. And the man who was healed of the demons had also a very surprising reaction. And he requested Jesus to come along with him. Jesus in that passage is also having a very surprising reaction. He tells the man, don't come after me, go to your people, tell your friends what the Lord has done to you and how much God had mercy on you. And why am I telling you all these things? Because that man became the first Gentile missionary. His work was fruitful, and we see it in Mark chapter 7, the passage that we are talking about today. People welcomed Jesus back very warmly in Decapolis. It was a result probably of that man. The Gentiles are demonstrating compassion towards the man, and they are also displaying faith in Jesus. Decapolis, the word means 10 cities. The very fact Jesus is in this 10 cities, the Gentile world, Jesus is amplifying his message. And these Gentiles are displaying compassion towards this man and exhibiting faith in Jesus. The Gentiles did what a deaf man could not do for himself. It would have been impossible that the deaf man had heard about Jesus and all his healing miracles. And even if the deaf man had somehow learned about Jesus and his miracles, there was no way that he could communicate it to others. The deaf man in the miracle was dependent on others for help. There is no mention that the deaf man had faith. The deaf man even did not know why people brought him to Jesus in the first place. So you notice people bringing the deaf man to Jesus and requesting Jesus to lay his hands on him. It was an act of kindness towards the deaf man. They wanted to help him, but they knew their limitation. They knew that they could not restore his hearing. They knew that they could not enable the man to speak. And therefore, they believed that Jesus could do it. They have heard about Jesus' healing miracles, sometimes probably through the man whose demons were cast out, or from their Jewish friends. Why did Jesus take the deaf man away from the crowd? The healing was a very private encounter, not a public spectacle in this scenario. Now, Jesus had identified with this man. He was always a public spectacle. or people were making fun of him. Now Jesus, by taking him away from the crowd, is telling that he is not just one of the crowd. He is not the problem. He is a unique individual. Jesus' method of healing. Jesus has a very unusual method of healing in this miracle. Jesus takes this man away from the crowd and he puts his finger in the man's ears. Then Jesus spits in his hand and touches the tongue of the deaf man. Then Jesus looks up to heaven and says, Ephphatha, and the miracle happens. Now you see, Jesus does not need to do all these rituals to perform and summon his power. In other occasions, we have seen Jesus performing these miracles by just saying the word. Why did Jesus do all these things? You know, Jesus calmed a storm with a command, peace, be still. Jesus healed Jairus' daughter by telling her, get up. Jesus heals the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman by just willing it so. Jesus does not need to say to do a particular thing to summon his power. But in this case, this miracle has a very unique pattern. But why does Jesus perform this ritual before healing the deaf man? The healing miracle is different because of the deaf man's need. The deaf man could not hear Jesus. Jesus could not speak to him like Jesus spoke to with people before the healing miracles. Jesus identifies with the deaf man's need and communicates with him in a language that the deaf man could understand, a kind of sign language. And that's the reason why the ritual was used in this healing miracle. So when Jesus placed his finger in the deaf man's ears and removed it, Jesus is communicating with him that I am going to remove the blockage of hearing. When Jesus spat and touched the tongue of the deaf man, he was communicating with him that I am going to remove the blockage of speech. And when Jesus looked up to heaven, he was communicating with the deaf man that it is not magic that is going to heal you, but the power of God. When Jesus sighed, it's like more like Jesus groaned. He's identifying with the pain of the deaf man. The first words Jesus spoke in the miracle. Now Jesus looked up to heaven to communicate that he's not doing this alone, but God is doing this for him. And Jesus said to the deaf man, Ephphatha. It's an Aramaic word meaning be open. Why was Jesus speaking Aramaic in a Gentile territory? Do you think that the deaf man would understand Aramaic? Or it is more symbolic that Mark is using in his text to communicate with his reader? Let's talk about it some other time. So what happened after Jesus says Ephphatha? The miracle happened. The deaf man could hear and he could talk. Literally, the word that is used is Jesus broke the shackles of the chain that blocked the man to hear and to talk. And the first words that come out from the deaf man is to praise and glorify God. So Jesus surprises with his command to remain silent. Now, after the miracle, Jesus is telling the people to remain silent and not to talk or tell about the miracle of healing the deaf man to anybody. You imagine this command to a man who had just received his gift of hearing and he could speak, to remain silent. But Jesus did exactly the opposite during his first visit to the Decapolis. He told the man to go out and tell his friends, tell what the Lord has done to you and how the Lord was merciful. Two situations, two different commands that Jesus gives. In first situation, he tells the man whose demons he had cast to go out and tell his friends what the Lord has done to him. And in this scenario, he's telling the people, don't tell what the Lord has done to this deaf man. Jesus' command to remain silent, and how can we understand it? Now Jesus is telling people to remain silent, not to talk about the healing miracles that they are witnessing. Now Jesus is telling this not only to the Gentile audience, he's also telling this to a Jewish audience. Now Jesus wanted to communicate who he is and why he had come here on earth. He wanted people to understand what is his purpose here on earth. Jesus wanted to curtail the misinformation that people were believing in the power of the miracles. People were believing in Jesus because he was performing these healing miracles. Jesus wanted people to understand who he really is and why he's come on earth. Even those close to Jesus failed to understand this aspect of faith. People called Jesus as the one who has done all things well. And what are the things that Jesus did well? We recall the words of prophet Isaiah, chapter 35, verses 4 to 6. Say to those who have an anxious heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with a vengeance, with the recompense of God. He will come and save you. And then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man walk and leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. For waters break forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. Let's talk about things that Jesus does well. Jesus gives rest to your soul. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11 verses 28 to 30, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus saves you from your sins. Jesus says in Mark chapter 16 verses 15 to 16, and he said to them, go into the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. Jesus gives you the peace the world cannot give. Jesus says in John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you, not as the world gives. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. And therefore you are invited to come to Jesus and let Jesus unchain you from the blocks that keep you from hearing, understanding and praising God. Thank you for staying with me and watching this entire video. It's raining very heavily outside. Thank you for bearing with this sound distortion, and I appreciate you giving a like for this video. Share this video with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, and let's meet in the next video.